Howdy SEO Moz fans, it's Whiteboard Friday. I'm Erica and I'm the community attaché here at SEO Moz. And today we're going to talk about copy editing and things you can do to make yourself look more professional. I realize many of you, we started out as SEOs, and a couple years ago in the industry, it was like keyword research, where am I ranking? The most copy you ever wrote was like a meta description, maybe a product description. But today, the world of SEO, as we know, is drastically changing. We're doing all sorts of copywriting these days. Content marketing's huge. You get guest blogging. We're all over. And a lot of you are really frustrated because you're like, oh, man, I wish my writing was better. I wish I had a writer on my staff to help me out. But sometimes you're that person who's doing a little bit of everything. Totally been there. So today we're just gonna talk about how to make your copy editing magical and make you look a little more professional. And people will be like, wow, I knew you were an amazing SEO. I didn't know what a great writer you were too. So these are some little handy dandy tricks I try to remember anytime I'm writing. So the first thing you wanna do is you wanna identify your why. Why are you writing this piece? What are you trying to accomplish by going out there and talking about it? So, like when I sat down to outline my Whiteboard Friday, I said, I have this knowledge about copy editing. I want to share it with SEO Moz's audience because I know you'll find it valuable, especially if, say, you're going to write a UMoz or something. So if you can focus really on your piece and figure out that why is so important with you, that's really going to make sure that your piece that you're writing comes together. If you're writing about kittens or unicorns, or if you're writing a serious piece about using Google Analytics, importing into Excel, and doing all these crazy, amazing SEO things, I know all of you know how to do. So the second thing that you want to focus on is finding your voice. Every writer writes a little bit differently, just as every person is a little different. And so as you continue to write and continue to practice, there'll be certain words you use, there'll be certain ways you phrase things that really identify who you are. One of the funnest things I like to play with is using styles or voices from other people. So for instance, I've totally written a blog post as Rand, and it was kind of funny, like, can I sound like Rand? Where can I go? Or I used to, and now actually Ashley, our content specialist, has taken this over, write the SEO Moz newsletter. And one time I wrote as Roger, but as Captain Kirk, doing a little captain's log. So you can have a lot of fun with your voice and your style. And don't be afraid to be a little kooky. Give it a little personality. Show who you are. Show what you're interested in. So the third tip, which is a little going more, once you've written your piece, you're kind of pulling back into the finer editing stage. Read your work aloud. Just do it. Sit there and go slowly. If you have to print it out, do it old school, and just read every word you've written. When I was a kid, I had this problem where I would always skip over the little words like the, a, and my teachers would just paper full of red. Like, what happened? And I finally broke that habit when I went to college and I started printing out my essays and reading them slowly aloud. I'm sure my dorm mate was like super thrilled to hear like my essays about ancient Celtic languages, for instance. But, it will so much improve your writing because you'll notice things, you'll read it and you'll be like, wow, it doesn't make any sense. What was I even thinking? So, it helps with some of those more embarrassing typos or confusion if your sentences are getting really long and complicated, especially as you're diving into more advanced topics. So, my fourth tip is put your writing aside. I'm sure many of you have suffered from writer's block or just frustrations when you get to the editing part. You know, you just don't want to let it go. Writers often call this killing your babies, which can be, it's kind of vulgar maybe, but you know, we get really attached to what we've written, and we can't always see how to edit it and how to bring it back in and really refine our piece. So, you know, maybe you start a draft and you set it aside, and maybe you come back to it tomorrow. Maybe you come back to it, you know, 6 months to a year from now. You never know when it's, you know, if it's something you love and it's something you're passionate about, maybe you can't push it. But sometimes maybe it's just that 24 hours, because I realize a lot of you are also out there writing things that are super time sensitive that, you know, you have to get out right away. Which brings me to the next point. Ask a friend to edit. If you're doing something really time sensitive, this is extremely helpful. And if your friend has any editing experience, it's even better. You never know what crazy typos you're gonna send out in the world, or what crazy communication flubs, or, you know, maybe your piece just needed like 5 paragraphs cut out of it. And having someone you trust and someone who you can respect their opinion goes even further. You definitely don't want to do things like I've done, where I was sending out an email about fly fishing clothing, and in the subject line I put flying fishing clothing, like sail today or something like that. And, you know, it just really helps you from making that mistake and then going, oh, what did I do? Oh no. And, you know, friends can also be great at telling you what's good about your writing and encouraging bringing those themes out. So I just wrote an essay about Doctor Who, and my editor came back to me and she was like, you know, you've been doing too much recapping. Cut this, cut this, cut this. And I was kind of sitting there like, oh my gosh, wilting flower, you know, I don't want to kill my babies. But what my editor was great about was she said, you know, I really love what you're doing here and here and here. Let's bring that out. So at the end of the day, I had to do a super bunch of editing, but it helped me to know what the best things were out of that piece too. So criticism is both a negative and positive. So getting a little more into like the technical, like a lot of you out there are like, how can I be better with my grammar? I get a lot of questions from people at SEO Moz about grammar things like, should I put comma here? What the hey? Where do I go? How can I improve my grammar stuff? So the first thing which I suggest is looking at what's called active versus passive voice. So when you have active, just means that it means exactly what you all know. The word active means that, you know, you're out and about, your language is springy, versus passive is just kind of in the corner. It's like the wallflower at the party. Like, you don't really care. So, for instance, if you have the sentence, the dog was jumping on the bed. Your dog's bad, dog's jumping on your bed, but it's just kind of boring. And if you're like, the dog jumps on the bed, it's much more active, tells you what the dog's doing. It brings that sentence to life. And often it's just a simple switch of moving what you're talking about at the end to the beginning. So you can look up more about active versus passive voice online. It's known as to be verbs are passive. So the next thing you want to do is look at your sentence lengths, and you want to vary them. A lot of people get really long-winded when they're writing because they're trying to cram everything in. And you get these super long sentences that are all the way to the ground. And if you just step back and look and be like, oh, I can put periods here, I can shorten it. I'm gonna have a short sentence, a long sentence. It's a little advanced, but it will make your writing much more snappy and sound like people actually converse. And for those of you who are really, really advanced in your grammar, here's my last tip. Learn to diagram sentences. I'm sure my 7th and 8th grade English teachers are very happy that I'm recommending this to all to you. But if you really want to know grammar, and if you really struggle with it, learn how to diagram sentences. And so you can identify the subject of your sentence, the verb of your sentence, the object, and any sort of clauses or anything. Then you can figure out if people come to you and say, like, you always have run-on sentences, you always have incomplete sentences. These are the type of things that if you can identify the parts of the sentence, you can say, oh, I know exactly why this sentence isn't working, or I know why it's not communicating clearly to my audience. But that's just your advanced homework. So I hope that all of you will learn these magical tips and transform your writing. You can now go from just an ordinary SEO to something more magical.